My name is Gabrielle Ramos García. I'm a logic teacher at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. In recent years, I've developed a research on logic and rationality, and today I will talk to you about a specific paper by Gillian Russell that was very useful to me. There are of course more works by her that I would recommend. I'm especially keen on Logic, a Feminist Approach, featured in the book Philosophy for Girls. In this paper, she presents a review on Valerie Plumwood's 1993 article The Politics of Reason Towards Feminist Logic, and more. But today I would talk to you about Logic Isn't Normative, published in 2017. First of all, does anyone think that logic is normative? Yes. For an instance, in 2004, John McFarlane published In What Sense, if any, is Logic Normative for Thought? As the title suggests, McFarlane refers to a possible explanation regarding the way in which logic is linked to human rationality. In short, a model proposal regarding the way in which logic can in fact regulate rationality through bridging principles, even though he does not postulate goals as high as they were thought from a stronger vision of rationality, such as the Boolean or Kantian view. McFarlane declares that he considers it relevant to restore the status of logic as a norm for rationality. His model will face, however, some challenges that are familiar to the topic of human rationality. On one hand, the model could be excessively demanding. It comes close to asking for omniscience to be rational. On the other, the model could ask agents to believe false or contradictory things in conjunction with true ones. And last but not least, the possibility of agents who ignore their epistemic duty towards belief revision. Despite such limitations, in his 2019 paper, 3 Ways in Which Logic Might Be Normative, Florian Steinberger proposes the following. Logical principles provide guidelines for the agent's reasoning in first person. They can be thought as standards for third-person evaluation, and they are capable of determining whether our evaluations of other agents are to be favorable or unfavorable. Steinberger concludes that the 3 mentioned guidelines, the things I've just mentioned, for considering the normative character of logic, are sustained and integrated into the foundation of McFarlane's bridging principles. McFarlane's proposal, despite the complications that it entails, presents at least one explanation regarding the way in which human rationality can be linked to logic. So, yes, there's people who defend that logic is normative, at least in a way. Furthermore, Gillian Russell specifically addresses to the concerns of logicians of paroconsistency, and I'll quote, "Logics specify relations of logical consequence on particular languages, and what makes a logic correct is specifying that relation accurately. That shouldn't be controversial until we notice that if logic were to be plural, 2 logics which disagree about the consequence relation on a single language might be both correct." She illustrates this problem contrasting classical logic and paraconsistent logic LP, since those disagree about whether the relation of logical consequence holds between the premises and conclusion of an argument of the form disjunctive syllogism. Classical logic says it does, but LP says it does not. And here's the thing. If logic is normative, then validity is supposed to have normative consequences. But if pluralism is true, then sometimes the answer to the question, is this argument valid, is yes and no. Roughly, we're facing a scenario where we have to choose between the idea of logic being normative and logic being plural. Moving on, so Gillian Russell states that there are 3 arguments in which a theory, including logical theories, can be linked to normativity. First, the argument from normative consequences, This is, logic is normative because it has normative consequences. Second, the argument from error. This is, the laws of logic are violated, therefore they are normative. And third, the argument of demarcation. Normativity provides the only way to successfully demarcate a logic. According to Russell, the problem with the argument from normative consequences is that it is false. Unitary sets of atomic sentences capable of attributing validity do not have normative consequences by themselves, but rather have normative consequences when considered in conjunction with norms that link truth to belief and reasoning. Physics and arithmetic also have this characteristic, at least. The problem with the argument from normative conclusions is that there are actually no violations of the logical laws, since they are descriptive of the laws of truth, and they are not about how we should reason. So that settles things for the argument from error. To say that logical laws are violated when someone makes a mistake or a fallacy is illegitimate, because descriptive laws cannot be violated. And finally, the demarcation argument is false because if logic were about how we should reason, an intuitionistic logic would tell us different things than a classical logic. And even worse, the consequences would imply that one logic is correct and the other is wrong. Norms are not a requirement to rescue logic. Better semantics would be enough. In short, the apparent normativity of logic is only a consequence of widely distended norms of relations between belief and truth, but these are not exclusive or consistently intrinsic to different logics. The laws of logic are never violated and the rules of reasoning are superfluous in the evaluations of logic. Although for Gillian Russell logic is not normative regarding rationality, her arguments do not seem to advocate a position where rational behavior is merely arbitrary. Since we would appreciate not giving in to trivialism, I would add, logic isn't normative itself. And well, nothing is actually. Normativity in a strong sense can only be conferred by speakers, like when we decide the laws for football or for Rome or whatever. According to another great female philosopher of logic, Ines Skelach from Croatia, in her 2017 paper, What We Talk About When We Talk About Logic as Normative for Reasoning, rationality is a practice that involves the interaction of different agents. Although logic, when we're studying validity relations, puts within our reach an analysis tool whose objectivity is rather accepted, it is wise to be moderate with our optimism in this regard. In the first place, because of the impossibility of following rules privately. Reasoning is intrinsically social, that is, although everyone develops their own beliefs, the process by which they are developed responds to the beliefs and reasons of others. Subsequently, she establishes the following. If one intends to understand logic as a science linked to correct thought, this entails the task of finding a logic that satisfies the complexity of the phenomenon of rationality. Which, as we've learned, wouldn't be easy. Along with others, Skelach dismisses the idea that a truth-functional assessment of rationality would be an answer, and in contrast, she thinks of logic as a dialogic discourse and practice. In short, we can only think of logic as normative for reason when we're reasoning about something. And last but not least, how to make the academia a more inclusive place. Well, I think the very first thing we have to do is focus on creating a safe spaces for our students to be aware that they are often coming from very different backgrounds and as a consequence they have different challenges to overcome. And this is not a minor task, so it requires our permanent attention as teachers or mentors. I don't think it is possible to reach a general formula rather than listening to the needs and interests of our students. However, I came across a text by Frederick Jansen Loret called Teaching Logic in a Gender Inclusive Way. She addresses some of the most frequent problems regarding gender inequality that we can face in the academia, such as logic being a male-dominated discipline, stereotypes, and chauvinism. Remarkably, she suggests specific strategies to reduce these biases and even gives a summary of positive outcome from these strategies. So my very specific recommendation would be go read Frederick Jansen Loret's paper. And that's about it. Thank you very much. Do not miss the chance to read these great authors: Gillian Russell, Ines Skelach, Frederick Jansen Loret, also Valerie Plumwood. And thank you very much. Jane.